The Galaxy Z Fold 5 was unveiled earlier today, and I honestly do not think you should get it. There aren't really a lot of changes from the Galaxy Fold 4. The external display is still quite narrow, not nearly as wide as that on the Pixel Fold or the Oppo Find N. There aren't really any major camera or battery improvements, and of course, there is still no inbuilt S Pen. But the main reason I don't think you should buy the Galaxy Fold 5 is gonna be discussed later in the video, so make sure you stay tuned. Anyway, let me tell you about my experience with foldables so far. I used the Galaxy Z Fold 3 as my daily driver for a couple of months, and while I absolutely loved it for the most part, I had to switch to the S22 Ultra. And you're probably asking why. Well, honestly, I feel like foldables just aren't ready yet. Of course, in my time with the S22 Ultra, there are some things that I have missed from the Galaxy Z Fold 3, one of which is the display. As amazing as the display on the S22 Ultra is, it doesn't really compare to that big and beautiful inner display on the Z Fold 3. The media consumption experience was just immaculate, playing games on it was so immersive, and it just felt so good to type and take notes on. In my time with the Fold 3, I found myself opening up the inner display as often as humanly possible. On the other hand, I absolutely hated the outer display. It was way too narrow, and the aspect ratio was too weird to really enjoy doing anything with it. You couldn't enjoy watching videos on YouTube or Netflix, playing video games felt really weird, and typing was just borderline uncomfortable. But speaking of comfort, that's another reason why I had to switch from the Fold 3. The S22 Ultra is by no means a small smartphone, but in comparison to the Fold 3, it's a lot more comfortable to hold in the hand or keep in your pocket. The Fold 3 was just so big and thick and heavy and bulky, and
that's what she said.
And whenever it was in my pocket, it constantly tried to pull my pants down. I kid you not, I wore a lot of sweatpants, and the Fold 3 was just that heavy. There was also this one time when I was using the Fold 3 in bed and it fell out of my hand and smacked me right in the face. I almost broke my nose. That actually happened. I wish I had some B-roll of it, but you're just gonna have to believe me. That thing weighs a ton. Now I know this is gonna be a little bit divisive, but one other thing I prefer on the S22 Ultra over the Fold 3 was just the biometrics. Honestly, I know a lot of people prefer physical fingerprint scanners to the ultrasonic ones that are in the display, but I still just wasn't a fan of the fingerprint scanner being built into the power button. I accidentally triggered it so many times by just trying to pull the phone out of my pocket, and by the time I actually get the phone out, I had exceeded my login attempts and I had to use my passcode or my pattern. And of course, the face unlock with the selfie camera wasn't really anything to write home about as well. And speaking of the selfie camera and just the cameras in general, we're going to talk about them very soon, so stay with me. And if you've been enjoying the video this far, then please subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. One thing I have to commend the Fold 3 for is the fact that it actually performed really well, even in 2023. I never really experienced any lags or hiccups. I could play all the heavy, graphically intensive video games that I wanted without having to worry about the frames dropping or the game lagging. I could open as many apps as I wanted and leave them open in the background thanks to the 12GB of RAM, and I could also comfortably open multiple apps at the same time on that gigantic inner display. And I think that is the one thing I miss the most about using the Fold 3. The multitasking, the ability to just drag applications and put them on the screen and they open up in split screen or pop-up view was just so amazing. And while it's possible to multitask on the S22 Ultra, it's definitely not the same. That's one advantage you get when you're using a Fold. It's kind of like having tablet privileges in the form factor of a very chunky smartphone. The software was also really refined to ensure that every app makes the most use of the giant internal display. And for some apps that did not natively support full screen in the internal display, you could just go to the settings and force them into full screen mode. While practically every smartphone brand except for Apple are making foldable devices right now, I genuinely think Samsung still has the best software when it comes to foldables because the experience is just second to none. Like I mentioned earlier, I loved typing and texting with the inner display, but more than that, I loved taking handwritten notes on it with the S Pen. What I did not love, however, was how big and bulky the S Pen was, and the fact that there was nowhere to actually store it, so you had to carry it around with you or put it in a very unattractive case. And that's clearly one advantage the S22 Ultra has, as if I ever want to take a handwritten note, I can just, pop out the S Pen from the bottom of the device and take my notes. And whenever I'm done with the note, I will just slot the S Pen back in there and voila, good to go. So I don't have to ever worry about forgetting my S Pen at home or forgetting it wherever I took a note last time, as with the foldables. And I think it's possible. I genuinely want to believe it is possible for Samsung to include the S Pen inside of the Fold, but I don't think they're going to do it for the next couple of iterations for one reason or another. Now onto the cameras. The Fold 3 did not really have the best cameras out there when it launched, so you can imagine that it doesn't really hold up so well in 2023. I can compare the camera quality of the Fold 3 to that of the Note 10 Plus of 2019. You can still take amazing photos in good lighting, but you definitely don't have the larger sensors of the newer devices, or the zoom capabilities, or the better low light photography or better video quality. And even the Fold 4, which shipped with newer and larger sensors similar to the S22 Ultra, still doesn't meet the top end of smartphone photography. But back to the cameras of the Fold 3. The selfie camera on the outer display was also pretty good, nothing special, but it was good. But to address the elephants in the room, the under display camera in the inner display was just, it was a tragedy. It was absolutely terrible. I mean, taking selfies with it was still, very hazy. You could not expect to get any sort of serviceable videos with it, and the lack of quality was actually noticed in video calls as well. So I don't think the trade-off for a seamless inner display was worth the poor camera quality. But Samsung have decided to stick with this under display camera technology, so I think the best we can do is hope that it will continue to get better as the years go on. Personally, I think they should just go back to a hole punch camera and give us a very good selfie camera on the bigger display. Now onto another aspect of the Fold 3 that does not hold up in 2023, and that is the battery life. It's one of the main reasons I had to ditch it and get the S22 Ultra. And I'm sure a lot of people are gonna say, well, the battery life on the Fold 4 was much improved. Yes, but so was the battery life on the S23 Ultra, which still lasts much longer than the Fold 4. So if you're looking at getting a Samsung foldable, you're not going to get the best battery life that Samsung has to offer. I think Samsung learned from their mistakes, because there was no way a 4400 mAh battery was going to be enough to power a 7.6-inch display with a Snapdragon 888 chipset. I mean, the Fold was encouraged as the productivity device, the powerhouse device, the device that is a phone and a tablet all in one, and you should be able to use it all day. But I was getting 4 to 5 hours of screen on time maybe, especially if I minimized my use of the internal display. And I'm not gonna lie, using a Samsung foldable with just the external display is quite depressing. I mean, you want to see that big, beautiful, vibrant, juicy display. I mean, you want to see the big display. So I'll tell you a funny story about what made me get out of bed and go and replace the Fold 3 with the S22 Ultra. And that was, I woke up one morning, opened up the Fold 3, as usual, and I discovered a blue line in the middle of the internal display. It wasn't green and it wasn't pink. So I was suspicious. I started to panic because I'm like, the internal display to replace it or to fix it in my country, in Nigeria, costs almost $1,000. And I was thinking, well, how much did I get the smartphone that I'm going to pay $1,000 to replace the internal display? But apparently it just turned out to be a bug from Telegram. And when I closed the app, the blue line disappeared. But that brief period where I was panicking and I thought I had somehow damaged the internal display was enough for me to go and, replace the device. So that is one thing you're going to have to keep in mind if you think you want to get a foldable. They're just way too fragile. And I mean this in the most honest way possible. Foldable phones are not ready in terms of durability. As much as they will tell you, oh, it has Gorilla Glass Victus, it has armored aluminum, blah, 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 blah. The internal display is still plastic. They might call it ultra thin glass or whatnot. It's still plastic. Plastic is gonna scratch. Your fingernail can, scratch the display or poke it and damage it. So you're going to have to keep that in mind. You will have to be very, very careful. And I'm not someone who has the patience or the energy to treat my smartphone like a fragile little egg. So yeah. And now the main reason a lot of people are still against getting a foldable, the price. I mean, if you're thinking of getting a foldable smartphone now, you're looking at about $1,800 to maybe $1,500 if you find one that's really cheap, or if you find one that's on sale. That is still really expensive. In a world where people are getting smartphones, really good smartphones, for $400, $300, or $500, paying 3 times as much just because the smartphone folds and is more likely to break doesn't really, seem very enticing. If we start seeing foldable smartphones, and I mean the book foldable smartphones, not the flip ones. If we start seeing those kind of foldable smartphones for about $1,000, $999, then I think it will be more enticing to the general populace. Foldable smartphones just aren't ready. They're not durable, they're not affordable, the battery life isn't the best, the camera quality is good but not amazing. So these are all, factors to consider. It's bulky, it's unwieldy. Unless you're going to be using it at home mostly, carrying it around is a little bit difficult. If you want a more objective look into the pros and cons of using a foldable device, or a Samsung Fold specifically, you can check out my friends Alex from Alex Gear and Tech and David, because they have made several videos about the Samsung foldable phones and even the Pixel Fold and which one might be better for you. Personally, I don't think I will be going for a foldable smartphone again anytime soon. I'm just gonna stick with traditional smartphones. But if you're still interested in getting a foldable phone, then you can check out their videos. And if you enjoyed this one, you can check out any of my other videos in this playlist. Peace.